Hi, welcome to this special episode of Polygraph. We have with us our political editor, DK Singh, and we also have our special correspondent, Angana Chakrabarti, who is joining us from Manipur. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, so today, as you know, we all know that elections has entered its last leg in Uttar Pradesh as well as Manipur. Campaigning will come to a halt on 5th in Uttar Pradesh. As far as Manipur is concerned, voting will take place on 5th. So let's try and understand from both DK Singh and Angana, what can we make out as far as election is concerned in both of these states? What can we expect from the BJP? What can we expect from the Alliance Samajwadi Party? So sir, DK sir, start with you. What can we say? You traveled extensively across UP also.
Well, let me make it very clear at the very beginning. I've decided to take a back seat today because Neelam is sitting in Varanasi and Angana left Manipur only yesterday. She is sitting in Guwahati now. So you are right there. You know what's happening on the ground. As for my travel, yes, I did travel around Eastern UP. Western UP were not there, but some of our colleagues were there. Shankar, Nimesh had gone, many others had gone. So from everywhere, Western UP, the narrative was different. Eastern UP, again, people are talking about different things. But one common thread I noticed was what you call that salt loyalty, which is being talked about. So you go to any household, and salt loyalty I'm saying because, I was somewhere in Gazipur, in a Gazipur village, and I was meeting almost an octogenarian lady. And I started asking her, and she said, in her local in her language, like something like that, basically जिसने जो नून दिया है उसी को वोट देंगे, something like that. Then she started talking about all this the help that that she got from the government, and the family, like as you know, like every family is getting 10 kg of food grains every month per person. Then you have 1 kg salt, 1 kg refined oil, 1 kg chana. Now you go to any house, the delivery has been there. And then you have everywhere you meet beneficiary of one scheme or the other. Somewhere it's Ujjwala scheme, somewhere it's PM Awas Yojana. So any family, if you look at it, annually they might have got benefits to the tune of say 1.25 to 1.5 lakh through government schemes. So these welfare measures are resonating on the ground. But then the twist in the tale is that, again, how it has taken the caste. So you go to another village, you meet some Yadav youngster. Now he says, fine, these schemes are fine, but there is so much of unemployment here. Tell me one job that has come to this village, anybody. You go to a Dalit household. So I was in a different area in Gazipur. I saw some very poor people in that locality, all the huts and everything. I went to them and I just asked them, कि आपकी बिरादरी क्या है? Basically, what's your caste? Started. They said Baspa. So that kind of narrative is there. So even when you are meeting beneficiaries, the narrative changes depending on who has got it. So yes, we have talked about this. We always talk about Mandal versus Kamandal thing, but Kamandal was there. You can feel the undercurrents, but it's not the dominant narrative there. Caste narrative, yes. How basically it works in UP, we don't know, because you have all these smaller parties. The same is true for Manipur also. These smaller parties, which are supposed to bring different chunks of those community votes, how do they fare? Are they able to do it? So say how it's all split. So I was in Zahurawad, for instance, and I was talking about this Gazipur. I was in Zahurawad constituency. Now you have Om Prakash Rajbhar contesting from there. Swalde party chief. Now against him, the BJP has fielded another Rajbhar, Kalisha Rajbhar. And then in a twist, former minister Sadaf Fatima, who's quite popular, SP denied her the ticket. BSP has given her the ticket. So everything, it's so confusing there. Again, you don't know where Rajbhars are going, whether they will go with the so-called representative of that community, or do you have former MLAs? two-term MLA Kalichand Rajba, whether he'll be able to swing some votes, or people will transcend caste lines and vote for somebody who is known for doing development, say Sada Fatima. We don't know. Come to Fazil Nagar, from where you have Soy Prasad Maurya contesting. Now, against Maurya, of course, he was in the news again because of the attack on his convoy, and his daughter, the BJP MP Sangmitra Maurya, has been very upset, and she has been actually targeting the party. But anyway, coming to that, he had to shift to Fazil Nagar. He did not contest from Padrauna. Shifted to Fazil Nagar. Now he's witnessing a contest. Because there also BSP, for instance, has put up a Muslim candidate, Ilyas Ansari. Now Ilyas Ansari was in SP earlier. He was a former district president of the SP. Which candidate is cutting whose votes? It's becoming pretty confusing. And for us, even if you travel around, it's from one seat to another. And depending on the candidates who have been filtered by different parties,
right,
it's very difficult to tell you a common narrative, that there is any dominant narrative. Caste, yes. Undercurrents of Hindutva, maybe, yes, people do appreciate what has happened to Kashi Vishwanath corridor or even Ayodhya temple, but that does not seem to be their choice. What will ultimately prevail is very difficult to predict.
Just to add to that, you mentioned that, well, more or less, no one is talking about BSP, but when I also visited Mahu constituency and I interacted with a lot of people, they also mentioned that, you are talking about Mukhtar Ansari, but Mukhtar Ansari had contested on a BSP ticket last time in 2017 when he won. This time his son Abbas Ansari is contesting on the SBSP alliance. So he said, where will the Rajbhar vote go? And a lot of them said that, one of them used the phrase, "Behan ji ne hame wo diya jo hamare mata pita ne nahi diya," and that is housing. A lot of them had got housing schemes under the government. So it is, as you rightly said, it is very difficult to understand who will be cutting whose vote. So it has become a triangular contest. For instance, and if you talk about PM Modi's constituency itself, Varanasi, which is a high-profile constituency, and if you look at the district itself, last time the NDA had won all the 8 seats, 7 by BJP, 1 by Apnadal. But this time round, we have been meeting people, interacting with them. People are only saying good things about PM Modi. I would say there is no dent in his image. But at the same time, local level, the MLAs, they have a certain anti-incumbency.
A lot of anti-incumbency against them. And what has happened is, after so many ministers and BJP leaders quit the party,
right,
joined the SP, the BJP high command came under so much of pressure that they had to retain many of the MLAs which they originally intended to basically do away with in this election.
Yes. So if you take the example of Varanasi South, for instance, and BJP, obviously all of its senior leaders are here and they're quite sure that, PM will be campaigning tomorrow and day after, and they want to ensure that the few seats on which they feel there will be a close contest, they should ensure that, there's more voting, or at the same time, people are able to see it as PM Modi contesting from there, not the local MLA. So we will have to see how that will sort of pan out on 7th when elections will take place. Angana, what about you? How do you see Manipur?
Very similar to what DK sir was saying, this narrative of development is something which is stuck even in Manipur. I visited several places in the hills as well as the valleys. So, in Manipur, the main sort of equation is between the hills and the valleys. The valleys are predominantly the ethnic Meiteis, who dominate the valleys. The hills are the tribes like the Kuki and the Naga tribes. So in the valleys specifically, everybody, the voters I was speaking to in several, constituencies, Bishnupur, Wangkhe, they all spoke about the ration they got, especially during the COVID time. And I think, I'm not sure what, what this indicates about the governance of Biren Singh, but definitely what I've seen is over the past 6 months, the BJP has specially put its focus, put everything behind their campaign in Manipur. They had door-to-door, these campaigns, pamphlets printed out to ensure that these points of development stuck. And it's been a huge issue in Manipur, which we know has been racked by years of insurgency, economic blockades. So that's definitely that's been in the focus of all of the campaign rallies. Even when the PM visited, spoke about how the BJP government, the 5-year reign of Biren Singh has sort of been able to, counter these kinds of the stoppage in development, so to say, brought in jobs. So, and even in the hills, when I went to a rally, Nitin Gadkari's rally in the hills. So what was interesting, they were bringing in union ministers like Bhupendra Yadav, Naqvi. They brought in Gadkari to specifically talk about their departments, about how their departments have affected governance in the state. So Gadkari spoke at length about the different kinds of roads road projects that they have implemented and will continue to implement in a place like Ukrul, where the road conditions are terrible. So this seemed to have resonated, but again, because a lot of the BJP candidates standing right now are in fact defectors from several parties, and several of them couldn't get tickets and then again defected. So there's this Arun Kumar who's standing from Wangkhe, which is a constituency in Imphal. He is up against Henry, who's very close to Biren, as well as NPP's Irabot, who was actually a BJP MLA, then couldn't get a ticket and now is standing on a National People's Party ticket. So some of the experts I spoke to said that because of this conflict over tickets, that will definitely play to the disadvantage of the BJP there. But I wouldn't say there's a BJP wave, but there's definitely a chance of it increasing, of the party being able to increase its number of seats since 2017.
See, just to add to what Angana is saying, for the BJP, see, in Manipur, when you talk about Hindutva narrative, it doesn't work in Manipur. So if you look at Manipur's demography also, you have about 42% Hindus, 42% Christians, then what, 7-8% tribals. So with that kind of demographic thing, there's not much that, you cannot be playing Hindutva card there. Right. Then it's again a border state. So you cannot even go ultra-nationalist. Right. So there the BJP has, actually, I think, rightly so, BJP has gone for this double engine slogan. It should work because, in times of COVID, you hear a lot of talk about unemployment in Manipur too. So PM Modi has been pushing that double engine slogan there. Okay. How much resonance it gets, we have to see. But ultimately, as in Goa, in Manipur also, I think the real thing will start after the results are out. Because you have again the smaller parties like NPP, NPF, JDU, how they perform, and they have so much of defection there. So about 11 Congress candidates, about a dozen Congress candidates are actually the BJP defectors. Right. About a dozen JDU candidates are again BJP defectors. Many, I think about 8 or 10 MLAs had actually MLAs and former MLAs of the BJP. They had moved to the JDU. So how these things play out on the ground will actually determine the final result. But yes, real election will happen after the election results are out.
In fact, there's a point to note here. Sir had mentioned earlier about the importance of these regional parties. And after Congress's regime, after 2012, it's something which is stuck out in Manipur. Even in the 2017 elections, we saw that these smaller parties like the NPP and the NPF, which is the Naga People's Front, actually became the kingmakers. So that sort of trend has continued. Now, even though they had 4 MLAs, the NPP had 4 MLAs, all 4 got cabinet seats, became cabinet ministers. In fact, Joy Kumar Singh, was appointed as the deputy CM of the state. So even right now, there is this understanding in the state across political leaders that I spoke to said that there is no one party which will be able to cross the majority, even the majority mark, even the BJP. And hence, I mean, I think that's also given a lot of, it's left a lot of space for the NPP. The JDU significantly is fighting for the first time on as many as 38 seats in the state, from nothing to 38 seats. So I think the role that these smaller parties have to play is definitely very important in these elections.
I'll just start with a few questions. A number of them have already started pouring in. MS wants to know, will free ration given to BPL voters play key role setting aside caste equation in these elections, DK sir?
I believe so, yes. To what extent, I can't predict. But anybody you meet, ask them. Maybe say when you are in a Dalit Basti, you may hear some complaints that the ration dealer is giving us just 6 kg or 7 kg, not the full quota.
Right.
But everybody is getting it. You will see some houses in the PM Awas Yojana and all this. So those things are very much visible on the ground. And see what Akhilesh has got his caste social engineering formula together, fine. But on the ground, what you see, okay, Muslims, Yadavs, well, you may expect them to vote together. That gives an edge to Akhilesh. But overall, if you look at this, he has no organizational structure on the ground. So Akhilesh is addressing rallies.
Right.
He is getting big crowds, but on the ground, he does not have the people to take the voters to the polling booth. And then you have, Madhuparna, our colleague, has done that story about how the RSS is kind of pulling out all stops in UP, like they're going door to door, campaigning, focusing their BJP agenda also. They're talking about Ram Mandir, they're talking about all these things. So they are right there on the ground. The SP does not have people on the ground, not to create a propaganda, even to sell that vision. So when you talk to youngsters there about unemployment problems, and it's a huge problem there, everybody's talking about it. But you ask them about which party they are looking at, which party will actually address their problem, they go silent. They're a bit confused. Because Akhilesh as an alternative, somebody who will provide it, is not very convincing yet.
But unemployment, no, I'm just adding, but unemployment as an issue, you think that, I did come across people
whether it will swing the results. See, what I'm saying is, people are dissatisfied with the government there are a lot of issues, even corruption. Okay, Yogi has a very clean image. But when you come to the system, everybody has to pay some money. So that corruption thing doesn't work. Unemployment is said. A stray cattle menace. Everybody is talking about it. But you sit with them and spend some time, you realize that these problems may not determine their voting behavior. So there is no anger as such. They are unhappy, but there are no anger. They are still looking at Modi to actually make up for whatever wrong is going on the ground.
Angana, another question for you. If BJP is able to come to power, will we have the same CM or a different one?
The feeling I got is, I feel that Biren definitely stands a very good chance, but there are definitely, and has been for some time now, many different camps and factions within the BJP. Bishwajit, another cabinet minister, he's definitely vying for the CM's position. There's KM Chand. There's the Congress Legislative Party leader, Govind Das, who defected to the BJP recently. Also, is somebody, there are murmurs about him wanting to, again, be propped up to the CM post. So I think all depends on the high command at the end of the day. But Biren definitely stands a very strong chance. Yeah.
Namra Patel wants to know, DK sir, how much space Priyanka Gandhi Vatra has been able to create in Uttar Pradesh so far, and would she play an impactful role in 2024 Lok Sabha elections for Congress?
Look, she has been able to create a lot of buzz on the ground, and I did speak to people about the Congress, and they would say, no, they are doing okay, but they are not in power, they are not going to come in power. So will Priyanka Gandhi be able to convert this buzz or carry the momentum she is trying to generate this time in future I'm not in a position to predict that, because what happens with the Congress also, like around the election time they come, they create a lot of buzz and then they go back home. So that could really also be, in Akhilesh's case also the same thing. For 4 years was not on the ground. He was kind of trying to do social engineering, even allotting party seats, like some district presidents and all that. But on the ground, at the booth level, you do not see Samajwadi Party people. But then, as I said, we cannot predict, we cannot say that, okay, BJP is going to have it very easy, because we know in Western UP, they face a lot of resistance. There's a major split in Jat votes. In Eastern UP, again, if you look at it, the last two phases, if you talk about, there are about 111 seats will go to polls. And out of these 111, the BJP had won 84 in 2017.
Right.
So again, we have talked about this anger against local MLAs.
Mm-hmm.
Will they let this anger go for a bigger thing? Will they think, okay, let's forget about this MLA and let's vote for Yogi and Modi? Or will they actually give it back to these MLAs?
Another question, I think it's an important one. What is your view on ticket distribution by BSP Supremo Mayawati? Would she go with BJP and become the kingmaker in case BJP is short of absolute majority?
Ticket distribution is very interesting. If you look at it, look at the profile of the candidates.
Right.
She has given about, say, 86 tickets to Muslims. So naturally, and we have been talking to BSP leaders, Muslims are not known to go with the BSP. In the past also. So giving them 86 tickets, you know which party it will hurt. But at the same time, she has given tickets to 70 Brahmins. So you don't know where which party those candidates will hurt. So it's a very mixed signal from her. But the fact is, on the ground, she has been doing this door-to-door thing. So she is not into, her style is not to go for mega rallies. And usually you have seen for the past 5 years that, she's like sitting at home, tweeting things, not going out among the people. But her party does a very, very different kind of a campaign where people keep going door to door. They'll tell you, okay, Mayawati's speech is coming on this TV, interview is coming on this TV, this channel, and that message will be conveyed to them. So you will not even get to know what the party is doing, because it's not very open. And, it's not at a mega level. It's at the grassroots level. So she will retain her support. Amit Shah is right. But yes, this confusion about what the BSP is going to do, I assume that's because, the other day Amit Shah said that BSP is going to get votes. You cannot discount Mayawati's relevance. And then Mayawati said, Ye to unka badappan hai, it's his humility. So how both of them were praising each other. But then there's a strategy behind it, at least on the BJP side. BJP has to make it a multi-corner contest. It's between BJP and SP, which it seems to have become. Things become a bit complicated. So first, you would like, for instance, the Muslims to believe that BSP is in the fray. So try to split that vote bank. At the same time, some Jatavs who are likely to be swayed by the food grains and other welfare schemes we are talking about, if they believe that, okay, there could be some understanding with Mayawati later also, so, who may fence sitters, okay, Mayawati has been there, but she may not come to power, so, okay, go to the other side. And Jatavs are not known to vote for the Samajwadi Party. So it's a pretty interesting strategy. Let's see what happens finally.
Angana, another question for you. John wants to know, how would you describe Congress's campaign and what can we expect?
So in fact, I had done a story about, because for a party which has been in power intermittently for about 40 odd years in the state, since the first elections were held in Manipur back in the 50s, on the ground, there was basically no Congress presence that I saw. I mean, you go and walk the streets of Imphal, it's just BJP flags, BJP posters. So, but I did happen to follow Chakrabarti Singh, who's been the longest serving chief minister in the state. So, in his constituency in Thobal district, and there in that constituency per se, I could see there was a surge of support for the Congress. But beyond that, I definitely think think the Congress doesn't have any resonance with the people anymore. Most of their narratives have been in counter to what the BJP has to say. They're mostly about how some of the development projects have been, implemented during their time. That's what they claim to be saying, but has then been taken over by the BJP and then being used in their rallies and their campaigns. But definitely there's been a decline of the Congress, and it's something that most people have noted. Most of the voters have also noted. They feel that there's been no Congress presence, so to say, over the past 5 years. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how much they managed to do in this
Just
election.
to correct what a small Angana, in Manipur, the first election happened way back in 48. In fact, a year before the state merged with.
Correct. Yeah.
That was that.
Yeah.
They had their own constitution and according
As
to
a
that.
council. Yeah.
Anyway, so when you talk about Congress campaign, Congress is just trying to puncture the BJP's double engine slogan. But the fact is, in Manipur, I think it's the first time that first broad gauge train has come.
Right.
Jan Shatabdi Express has been started. So when you talk about the visibility of something happening, it's there. I think the Prime Minister also announced over a dozen mega development projects. Whether that will swing the election, we don't know in a major way because it's complicated. When she talks about Hill Valley divide, now Valley, talk about Metis were primarily Vaishnavites, but their number is not that much. Although in the Valley you have 40 seats coming from the Valley.
Right.
Still, it's very complicated. In the hill areas, for instance, I'm sure AFSPA must be a big issue, especially after the killing of over a dozen civilians in case in Nagaland.
Right, but that's been a very interesting thing because I found no mention of the AFSPA anywhere that I went, even in the NPP rallies where, NPP is one of the parties to have taken a very strong stand in their manifesto. Even in their rallies, they barely mentioned it. It's mostly been about development and the roads, and coming from the 2017 elections when we saw Irom Shamila, the Iron Lady of India, kind of contest against Ibobi Singh, and then AFSPA had become a sort of narrative. Just 5 years later, the narrative has changed to only development. So what we're seeing in the hills, yes, I think BJP will definitely be able to increase on its seat count is the feeling I'm getting, but mainly it's still because the kind of equations in the hill, given the involvement of underground groups, also remain a very big factor there. So I think the NPF will definitely perform well, but again, all of these small parties are still vying to be in alliance with the party that comes to power. But AFSPA didn't, even the insurgency has not made an appearance this time.
Even in the hills.
Even in the hills, sir, even in the hills.
That's very interesting. I will end with this last question. Sankalp wants to know why people seem to have no confidence in Congress and regional parties. Where have they lost the plot? Do you see nepotism as the key reason? And do you think these elections are going to define the role of Yogi Adityanath in politics?
It may define, come to later, the second part of the question, redefining Yogi Adityanath's role, yes. Because if he wins, look, he'll be the first CM who has completed 5 years and gets a renewed mandate. That will be historic. Because there have been CMs who have been there for 2.5 years, 3 years, and then got a renewed mandate. But not for 5 years and then getting it again. And then becoming chief minister like this of India's largest state, which has 80 Lok Sabha seats. Well, it will have long-term ramifications. And for the BJP, for the way they have been talking about the succession battle, not exactly the battle, I'm talking about succession debate, and the way RSS has been backing Yogi, so RSS is backing fully now. So yes, if the BJP wins, we'll have many interesting things. As for regional parties, somehow what has happened, BJP is kind of election behemoth. It keeps walking on the ground. Regional parties, their problem is, let's not talk about Naveen Patnaik, he's different, he's constantly there. But you talk about Samajwadi Party or Bahujan Samajwadi Party, they just disappear from the scene once the elections are over. And the kind of organization the BJP has, the organizational machinery, these parties are missing.
Right.
Then, of course, the BJP advantage is that Modi factor, that at least in UP.
Yes, it's a big factor.
It's a big factor. But again, when you talk about those local level equations,
yes,
who is the candidate, how things are kind of unfolding. So these equations may make a big difference, especially because, Akhilesh is also his bloc, at least Yadav Yadavs and Muslims are together. Whether he is able to eat into the BJP's vote bank or recently created vote bank among non-Yadav OBCs, that will make a lot of difference. We don't know that. If that happens in Eastern UP, well, it'll change the results. But there is no clarity as such. On the ground, at least, you do not really see people like abandoning the BJP. Dissatisfaction, yes. Not that kind of anger. But then on caste lines, if they start voting, or they have been voting or daily voting in the next 2 phases, then things may change.
Yeah, I mean, even I'd like
I'm talking about non-Yadav OBCs, because, Akhilesh has gone with Rajvas, the Mahandal is there, smaller community leaders are there. Will they be able to deliver it for Akhilesh? That will be crucial.
Yeah, even I'd like to add here that about the organizational machinery of the BJP, I mean, a very, very poignant and interesting instance of it. I mean, they've been working on the ground in Manipur, just canvassing, doing surveys for the past 6 odd months. They started reviving these schemes like Go to Hills and Go to Village. And in the Go to Village, they would organize these melas that would be attended by bureaucrats also, wherein people were urged to come and just voice their grievances. And these bureaucrats would directly deal with them in person. And they had this recurring across the state. They had 8 such melas. So the kind of election machinery that we've seen in the BJP, it's definitely not something I've seen the Congress within the Congress party at all. So, but again, in Manipur too, because candidates play a very big role. The candidate face in every constituency sometimes kind of overrules all parties. There's still no ideological kind of sensibility, ideological lines that are being drawn in these elections. So let's see how it pans out.
There is a problem with the Congress in Manipur. Now, what is happening? See, Okuram Ibobi Singh, he was the chief minister of 15 years.
Yeah.
Congress does not have any fresh crop of leadership. And Ibobi Singh, again, I think he is facing corruption charges also.
Right.
And he is around 80. How much can he deliver? And then, if you remember, in his last term, there were these so-called anti-tribal bills which made the Congress very unpopular. Has the Congress been able to change the narrative on the ground to bring some fresh ideas, give some fresh hope to people? I don't know.
That's definitely not happened. And even when I talked about Govindas, one of the reasons that he left the party was when Ibobi propped up his own son. So we definitely see dynastic politics even play out in Manipur in those many ways. So the Congress is definitely on a decline there. And it will be an interesting election result.
Well, political parties are definitely not leaving anything to chance. We saw Akhilesh Yadav, Mamata Banerjee, they did a rally today. We are expecting PM Modi tomorrow. He will be in Varanasi for 2 days. So we can expect a lot more in the last 2 days of campaigning. Thank you so much for such valuable inputs. We will talk once again and have a show on March 10th when the results will be announced. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neelam. Thank you, sir.